Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at the book of Leviticus. This is our introduction into a series. Leviticus chapter 1, verse 1, Then the Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting. As our story opens, we're at the tent of meeting, the tabernacle, and it's just been built, and the Lord has just entered the building, and now we're going to see what we're to do with it. So the name of this book, the Hebrew name is Vayikra, and he called, is just taken from the very first verse. The Hebrew title, Leviticon, where we get our word Leviticus, goes back to the Levites, the descendants of Levites. It's from there we're going to have the priests and those who serve in the tabernacle. Exodus ends with the construction of the tabernacle, and now Leviticus tells us of the worship that's going to take place in that tabernacle. So it picks up right where Exodus leaves off. Genesis starts with creation. Exodus started in bondage. Leviticus now starts in sacrifice. In Genesis, it depicts the rise of God's people. Exodus tells of the redemption of Egypt, coming out of Egypt and coming to Mount Sinai, getting the instructions for the tabernacle and building the tabernacle. Now Leviticus sets forth the rituals of worship and holiness that take place in and around the tabernacle. In Genesis, we have the origins of the nation. In Exodus, we have the deliverance of the nation. Now in Leviticus, we have the spiritual life of the nation. In Genesis, the theocracy is born. In Exodus and Leviticus, the theocracy is now established. By theocracy, we mean God reigning as the king over his people. Now, why should we study Leviticus? A lot of people wonder that and then decide not to. First of all, this gives us the historical background for the rest of the Bible, especially when we get to chapter 26. We're going to have the entire history of the rest of the Bible laid out prophetically before us. So there's some good historical reasons. This is the historical background of the rest of the Bible. Also, there's some theological reasons. It establishes such principles as redemption and sacrifice and holiness, things that are going to be major themes in the rest of the Bible. And finally, because there are religious reasons, it teaches us about. Our outline of Leviticus starts off with rituals. We're going to jump right into laws of the offering, chapters 1 through 7. Then we'll transition over to those who are officiating at those offerings, the priests. So we'll have laws of the priests, chapters 8 and 9. Next, there are laws of purity. We could call it laws of holiness, but I'm going to go with purity here in chapters 11 through 15. And then the pivotal point, the central point of the whole book, is chapter 16, the Day of Atonement. After this, we have more laws of, you could call it purity or holiness, but I'm going to go the second time holiness. Shades of meaning there, maybe. More laws of the priest, and more rituals, although this time it will be dealing with appointed times. And you'd think we're done, but actually there's two more chapters. There's penalties and vows that are given in chapter 26 and 27. Maybe you could put that under the subset of rituals, but it's not really appointed times. It's not even necessarily rituals, although I suppose the vows are. Now, what is the big idea in the book of Leviticus? I want to submit that the big idea in this book is holiness. God says, "Be holy, for I am holy." Now, this big idea is derived from chapter 11, verse 45. Actually, it's said a number of different times. You shall be holy, for I am holy. God is holy, and he calls his people to be holy too. This brings up the question, what does it mean to be holy? What is holiness? Holiness, I like the definition, I forget who said it first, otherness. We think about the time Jesus was on the Sea of Galilee with his disciples. And a storm began to blow up, and suddenly there was wind and there were waves, and yes, it's just a lake, but the boats were rather rickety back then, and the disciples started to get worried. Even those who made a profession going back and forth and fishing on this lake. And they wonder, should we wake up Jesus because he was asleep in the back of the boat? And they don't want to do that because he'll wake up and chew them out. And they try to make landfall, but they can't do it. And finally they wake up Jesus, and sure enough, he wakes up and he chews them out. And then he turns to the winds and the wave, and he says, "Quiet!" And the wind and the wave all of a sudden become quiet. And then we read they were very afraid. Now, they didn't jump out of the boat and try to run, but they were very afraid asking, what kind of person is this? They were confronted with the holiness of Jesus. Now, what is the opposite of holiness? We usually want to say sinfulness or unholiness. Really, the opposite of holiness is commonness. And that means when we look at purity versus holiness, is there a difference between the two? Purity versus holiness. I want to suggest that there is, that something can be pure versus impure and still be common, but when it's holy, it's in a separate category altogether. It's special. It's other than everything else. So it's holy versus common. Common can be pure. Common can be impure. But common versus holy. And we are called not to be common, not just to be pure, although we are called to be pure, but we are called to be holy. And that is something else entirely.